My boyfriend tried to kick me out of my own house so he could party. You're a selfish. I practically live here, he screamed. I dated David for 2 years, and looking back now, I genuinely don't know how I managed to convince myself that every red flag was actually just a weird decorative banner flapping in the wind. Like, girl, be serious. If denial burned calories, I'd have been built like an Olympic athlete. He lived about 20 minutes away, which somehow turned into him, acting like he had partial ownership of my entire existence. Funny how geography works when you're delusional. The thing about David was that he loved this version of me he'd invented, not the real me, the imaginary spoiled princess who apparently floated through life on a magic carpet, made of mommy and daddy's money while birds sang Disney songs every morning. Reality wasn't nearly that cute. Yeah, my parents helped pay for college after I graduated, as in after years of me juggling scholarships, loans, exhausting work schedules, and surviving almost entirely on caffeine and pure stubbornness. I didn't even know they'd saved money for me. They basically surprised me with it after everything was already over. But facts were never David's favorite hobby. His favorite hobby was acting like I'd never struggled a single day in my life. He'd throw little comments around. You don't really know what hard work is. You've always had everything handed to you. You're kinda spoiled. Every single time I'd just sit there thinking, buddy, I literally worked 40 to 50 hours every week. My job wasn't sitting behind a desk answering 3 emails and pretending. Excel was stressful. I was constantly moving, always exhausted, always covered in sweat or dirt or something. That made me question every life decision that got me there. Then I'd come home, and instead of relaxing like a mentally stable person, I'd spend my weekends rebuilding my grandmother's house. Because that's another thing David somehow twisted into proof that I was privileged. My grandmother's house. 3 years earlier, I'd moved into it because my mom hated the place. It wasn't pretty. It needed work. Honestly, it looked like one strong sneeze away from becoming an archaeological site. My mom moved across the country for work and signed the house over to me. So suddenly I had a house, which sounds way cooler than it actually was because people here owns a house. And imagine luxury. No, I owned an extremely enthusiastic fixer-upper. Every spare dollar disappeared into repairs. Every weekend disappeared into projects. I literally installed wood flooring myself. Do you know how annoying flooring is? Because I do. Every plank became a personal enemy. Every measurement somehow betrayed me. I swear wood has emotions because it absolutely waits until you're halfway finished before deciding it wants to be crooked. I earned every square inch of that floor through suffering. Meanwhile, David would look around the place I'd spent years fixing and somehow conclude, see, you've never had to work. I wanted to launch a hammer directly into the sun. Not at him. Mostly, okay, maybe slightly at him. I'd tell him those comments bothered me. He'd apologize. Then 2 weeks later, another little jab would magically appear. Just tiny enough that if I reacted, I'd somehow become the sensitive one. Classic. The frustrating part? I actually loved him. I know. Please don't yell it past me. She's already embarrassed enough. He wasn't awful every second of every day. Sometimes he was funny, sometimes thoughtful. Sometimes we'd spend an entire weekend together and everything felt easy. Then he'd randomly decide he needed to be the loudest, funniest, coolest guy in every room. Like he thought life was one giant audition for world's most interesting man. Spoiler, nobody was casting. Then came the party. The stupid party. The party that somehow became the moment my brain finally started waking up. David asked if he could throw a small birthday gathering for his friend Mike. Cake, pizza, a couple beers. 8 people total. Honestly, that sounded great. I knew everyone coming. Mike and I were actually friends before David and I even dated. Mike's wife was awesome. The whole thing seemed low-key. David promised he'd clean everything afterward. Cool. Done. Then he asked if I could leave my own house for the evening. I'm sorry. What? I genuinely thought he was joking. Nope, completely serious. He wanted me to disappear so he could have the house to himself. I asked why. He couldn't answer. At all. Eventually, he muttered something about wanting to feel like he had his own place. Sir, you do have your own place. It's called your apartment. Groundbreaking concept. Maybe throw the party there? Wild idea. I asked why I couldn't just stay and hang out. I liked Mike. I liked everyone invited. I liked pizza. I liked beer. I loved cake. Frankly, cake had done absolutely nothing wrong in this situation, and I wasn't abandoning it. The more he talked, the sketchier it sounded. There wasn't an actual reason. He just wanted me gone. Out of my own house. Because apparently my existence ruined whatever fantasy he had going on in his head. So I finally told him no. Either I was included, or the party wasn't happening here. Simple. Reasonable. Apparently, according to David, total dictatorship. David stared at me like I'd just committed some massive crime against humanity because I refused to voluntarily evacuate my own freaking house. Then he hit me with the classic. I was controlling. Of course. It's amazing how quickly the word controlling shows up the second someone hears the word no. Apparently having boundaries was dictatorship now. Who knew? He kept going on about trust. You should trust me. I remember sitting there thinking, trust you to do what exactly? Because if you can't explain why I need to leave my own property, maybe the problem isn't my trust issues. Maybe the problem is your explanation has the structural integrity of wet toilet paper. I finally snapped and said, my house, my rules. Yeah. Probably sounded harsh. Not exactly Hallmark material, but I also wasn't interested in pretending. My house suddenly belonged to whoever asked loud enough. That somehow made everything worse. Now I was acting like his mom. Apparently expecting basic respect from another adult was maternal behavior. Interesting theory. I'll be sure to publish it in a psychology journal. He stormed off dramatically because obviously he did. Every disagreement with David eventually turned into him performing emotional theater. Doors, heavy sighs, silence, walking away, waiting for me to chase after him. I was getting tired just watching the production. Eventually, he came back and told me he'd respect my rules. You know, when someone says the right words but somehow makes them sound like they're being held hostage? Exactly like that. Then he muttered something about how he hated being reminded to be an adult. That sentence didn't fully register until later. At the time, I just let it slide, because apparently I had a doctorate in letting weird crap slide. Friday finally rolled around. Honestly, it was nice, which almost makes what happened afterward even more ridiculous. Everyone showed up around 5. 8 people total. Mike, his wife, some mutual friends, pizza everywhere, cake, a couple beers, people laughing, just normal adult stuff. Nobody was getting blackout drunk. Nobody was standing on furniture. Nobody was trying to reenact scenes from a college movie. Most of us had jobs, bills, back pain. People over 30 get sleepy. It's honestly kind of adorable. We mostly just hung out talking about random nonsense for hours. The exact kind of gathering I actually enjoy. I'm pretty introverted. Huge parties drain me faster than my phone battery when I accidentally leave. Bluetooth on, small groups, perfect. Everyone respected the house. Nobody made a mess. Actually, they cleaned without even being asked. People grabbed trash bags. Boxes disappeared. Empty bottles got tossed. It took maybe 15 minutes before everything looked normal again. Mike thanked me for hosting. His wife asked if we wanted to get together another weekend. Everything felt easy, which should have been the ending. Normal people would have called it a successful night. Then David's phone rang. I barely paid attention. He answered casually. "Oh yeah, sure man, come on over." Immediately my stomach dropped. Not because I knew exactly what was happening, because I knew enough. Then I heard it. A horn. Car tires crunching over the gravel driveway. Headlights sweeping across the living room windows. That weird feeling when your brain solves the puzzle before anyone speaks. I looked over, asked if he was going somewhere. The look on his face answered before his mouth did. Pure guilt. Like a kid caught trying to sneak cookies, except the cookie was apparently an entire second party. He admitted he'd invited more guys over. They're just gonna hang out for an hour or two. Excuse me? What? No, absolutely not. The original party was over. Everyone had already left. I had work to do. I wanted quiet. My social battery was basically blinking at 1%. I told him I didn't want more people coming inside, that if he wanted to invite people into my home, he needed to actually ask me first. Crazy concept. Then everything exploded. I pretty much live here. No, you absolutely did not. This man spent maybe 2 nights a month at my house. 2 days. Month. The rest of the time I usually drove to his apartment because it was closer to my job. Somehow those occasional sleepovers had evolved inside his, brain into partial ownership. I almost laughed. It was honestly so absurd my brain struggled to process it. Then came the next sentence. I have a right to invite people over. No, you don't. You literally don't. Not legally, not morally, not spiritually, not in any alternate universe approved by physics. Someone knocked on the front door. Perfect timing. Like the universe itself wanted maximum awkwardness. David started moving toward it. I told him not to answer. Firm. Clear. Simple. He froze for maybe half a second, then looked at me like I was ruining Christmas. I told him the party was over. His friends needed to leave. Actually, correction. His friends needed to never come inside in the first place. I wasn't interested in hosting Surprise Party, the sequel, especially not after explicitly saying no. He completely lost it. Called me a selfish bitch. Honestly, that one almost made me laugh. Selfish? For wanting to sleep in my own house? For not wanting strangers drinking until 2 in the morning on my couch? What an incredibly selfish monster I was. Next, you'll hear I also enjoy breathing oxygen. The audacity. He grabbed his stuff, stormed out, door slammed, car pulled away. Silence. Real silence. Not the fake dramatic kind. Just quiet. I locked the door, started picking up the last couple things sitting around. Was I upset? Yeah. Mostly confused, because it genuinely felt like we'd experienced 2 completely different nights. In my version, we hosted exactly the party we agreed to. Everyone had fun, everyone left happy. Mission accomplished. In David's version, apparently I'd committed a war crime by refusing to let my house become an after-hours clubhouse. The mental gymnastics were honestly Olympic level. I went to bed exhausted, thinking maybe he'd cool off overnight, thinking maybe tomorrow we'd actually talk like adults. I still hadn't figured out something incredibly important. This argument was never actually about the party. The party was just the excuse. The real fight was over something way bigger, control. And unfortunately, that lesson was about to hit me like a freight train. Around 3 in the morning, my phone started vibrating across the nightstand. You know that half-asleep panic where your brain immediately assumes somebody died? Yeah. Instead, it was David, drunk, slurring, asking me to come pick him up because he was too wasted to drive. I just sat there staring at my phone like, are you actually serious right now? You spent the last several hours calling me every name you could think of, walked out acting like I was the villain, and now suddenly I'm Uber? Cute, real cute. I told him to sleep it off, hung up, rolled over, went back to bed. Honestly, one of the healthiest decisions I'd made in months. The next day, he showed up around noon. No apology. Not even close. He launched straight into explaining how I'd ruined his night. Apparently, he didn't know if he could ever forgive me. That's rich. He said I'd embarrassed him. Embarrassed everybody. According to him, Mike had called afterward because he was upset. I actually remember blinking a couple times because my brain was buffering. Mike? Upset? That didn't line up with literally anything I'd witnessed. Mike left smiling. His wife left smiling. Everyone thanked me. Nobody looked traumatized. Unless someone had secretly developed PTSD from eating pizza before 10, the math wasn't mathing. David just kept going. How could I do that to him? How could I be so selfish? Then he said the sentence that completely rearranged my brain. We'll live here one day, so you should get used to having my friends over. Excuse me? Will what? It wasn't even presented like a discussion, not a dream, not a future conversation. It sounded like he'd already decided. Like my house had quietly become our house without anyone bothering to inform the only person whose name was actually attached to it. That feeling, it's weird. Like someone reached into your life with permanent marker and started writing their name on your stuff while smiling. I suddenly started remembering dozens of little things I'd ignored. How he'd casually criticize my decisions. How he'd roll his eyes when I bought supplies for the house. How he'd joke about our place more often lately. How he'd act inconvenienced whenever I said no. Tiny moments. Nothing dramatic by themselves, but stacked together. They painted a picture I really didn't want to look at. Still, I wasn't completely there yet, because apparently my denial package came with unlimited minutes. So instead of dumping him immediately, I called one of my friends, then another, because sometimes you need someone outside your own brain. Your brain is a terrible roommate after enough emotional manipulation. Mine had basically become customer service. Have you considered maybe this is somehow your fault? Thanks, brain. Very helpful. One friend thought maybe I'd overreacted. She said I'd probably killed the vibe, that maybe I should have just let them hang out another hour. For about 5 minutes, I actually questioned myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was too uptight. Maybe normal people would have just, I don't know, sacrifice their entire weekend for people they didn't invite? Then I remembered something important. I worked 54 hours that week. 54. I usually went to bed around 9, got up around 6. I wasn't 21 anymore trying to survive on energy drinks and bad decisions. I liked mornings. I liked routines. I liked waking up without finding mysterious shoes in my living room. Also, this part mattered more than I usually admitted. I don't really like drinking. My dad drank a lot growing up. Too much. Alcohol just makes me nervous. Not because every person who drinks becomes a disaster. Obviously not. But once people start getting really drunk, my brain never fully relaxes. That's just reality. So yeah, I intentionally wanted the party to end before everyone got hammered. I didn't want strangers passed out on my couch. I didn't want whiskey bottles all over my kitchen. I didn't want someone throwing up in my bathroom while I wondered whether my towels would ever emotionally recover. Call me crazy, the horror. A peaceful night's sleep. Then something happened that completely flipped everything upside down. I called Mike, mostly because I wanted to know if David had been telling the truth. I figured if I genuinely upset him, I'd apologize. Simple enough, Mike answered. We talked for a while. Then I asked whether he'd talked to David after the party. Yeah, okay, here we go. Except, not here we go. Mike said they'd only talked for maybe 5 minutes. Not about the party. About golfing. Actually, Mike had turned David down. That caught me completely off guard. Apparently, the party wasn't the issue. It was David himself. Mike started telling me about another night they'd gone out together. David had gone drinking with some coworkers. A few younger women from work came too. Nothing inappropriate happened. David didn't cheat. That wasn't the problem. The problem was everything else. The women got completely wasted. David refused to leave. Eventually, he called some buddies to pick everyone up. Then he dragged Mike over to those same friends' house. The exact guys he'd tried sneaking into mine. Mike said the whole night felt awful. The guys spent their time making disgusting jokes about Mike's wife, smoking weed, acting like overgrown teenagers who thought basic decency was optional. Mike finally left because he'd had enough. Then came the part that honestly hurt more than I expected. Mike told me that during my party, every time I wasn't nearby, David complained about me. Constantly. Called me immature, stupid, made fun of me, mocked me. To people I'd welcomed into my own home. I just sat there holding my phone, completely still. It's amazing how quiet your house gets when your entire relationship starts collapsing in real time. Mike finally sighed and said something that was painfully honest. He liked me. He wanted to stay friends with me. But if I stayed with David, he needed to keep his distance. Because David wasn't someone he wanted in his life anymore. That was it. Not one giant revelation, not one dramatic explosion. Just click. Like somebody finally turned the lights on in a room I'd been pretending wasn't dark. And once the lights were on, there was absolutely no way I could convince myself everything looked fine anymore. A couple days later, I invited 2 friends over for lunch. Nothing fancy, just food, coffee, and what accidentally turned into a 3-hour post-mortem of my entire relationship. It's funny how saying things out loud changes everything. Thoughts sound reasonable inside your own head because they bounce around in there with zero supervision. The second another human hears them, you realize you've been defending absolute nonsense. I started from the beginning. Little moments, random comments, weird arguments, money, the house, the party, everything. Then I repeated some of the stuff David had actually said to me over the past 2 years. And halfway through, I literally stopped talking because hearing my own words come back out of my mouth felt ridiculous. Like, hold on, I've been accepting this? Seriously? At some point, one of my friends didn't even have advice. She just looked at me with that face. You know the face. The one that's somehow both sympathetic and deeply concerned. Like you're telling someone you've been microwaving aluminum foil for 6 months and wondering why sparks keep happening. That's when it hit me. Not dramatically, not with tears, not with music swelling in the background. Just this quiet feeling. I don't want to do this anymore. That's it. Simple, clean, almost weirdly peaceful. The stress I'd been carrying around for months just left. Like my shoulders finally remembered they weren't supposed to be earrings. I realized I'd already started emotionally checking out after the party. I just hadn't admitted it yet. So when David texted me asking if he could borrow my gas card, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because the timing was almost offensive. Of course this was happening now. I'd never let anyone borrow my cards. Not family, not friends, not him. Money and relationships can become absolute dumpster fires overnight, and I had zero interest in starring in that episode. Instead, I told him to come over. We needed to talk. My friends immediately volunteered to stay. Honestly, I appreciated it. Not because I thought he'd get violent. I just didn't want to do it completely alone. Moral support is underrated. Sometimes you don't need someone to fight your battles. You just need witnesses in case your confidence starts glitching halfway through. He showed up, walked inside, asked for the gas card like this was any other afternoon. I looked at him, took one breath, and said it. We're done. You're not getting the card. I don't want to see you anymore. That was basically it. No speech. No dramatic performance. No 10-page PowerPoint presentation titled, "Reasons You're Exhausting." Just done. He asked for his movies back. I handed them over. Then I told him to keep the $200 he still owed me. Seriously, keep it. At that point, I considered it an emotional processing fee. The cheapest therapy bill I was ever going to get. He walked out. Quietly. I remember shutting the door afterward and thinking, that was easier than expected. I was wrong. Very wrong. Because about 48 hours later, my phone absolutely lost its mind. Texts, calls, voicemails, more texts. Around 30 attempts altogether. Apparently, I was suddenly the love of his life. He needed me, couldn't live without me, wanted another chance. Funny how those feelings become incredibly urgent after getting dumped. Then the real reason started leaking out. He was behind on rent. He'd blown most of his money partying. He'd been planning to borrow cash from me. Actually, not borrow. Based on the way he talked, he thought I owed him. That word genuinely made me laugh. Owed him? For what? Providing weekly headaches? Premium gaslighting? The Deluxe Emotional Confusion package? Absolutely incredible business model. I blocked his number. Problem solved. Except, not quite. He showed up at my house. Twice. Didn't matter that we'd broken up. Didn't matter that I'd blocked him. He just appeared. The second time I didn't even open the door. I spoke through it. Told him if he didn't leave, I was calling the police. Amazing how quickly confidence shows up once you're completely done with somebody. He left. I changed every lock. Didn't even hesitate. Some people called it dramatic. Cool. Those people were welcome to donate their own house if they felt so strongly. I also started seeing a therapist, picked up extra shifts, started spending more time with actual friends. Real friends, the kind who leave your house cleaner than they found it. Wild concept. I planned a trip to the mountains with my friend Amelia, got a massage. The therapist worked on knots in my shoulders that were probably old enough to pay taxes. Dyed my hair red because apparently heartbreak comes with an uncontrollable urge to alter your appearance. Honestly, 10 out of 10. No regrets. Mike and his wife stayed in my life. Turns out losing one person made room for better ones. Who would have guessed? I figured eventually the breakup sadness would hit. Maybe I'd cry. Maybe I'd miss who I thought David was. That would have been normal. Instead, life had one final plot twist waiting. A couple months later, David got arrested. Drug possession. Felony charge. During all of that, he'd also spent weeks stalking me, following me to work. Then he threw a freaking brick through my window. Yeah. A literal brick. Nothing says please take me back quite like committing property damage. Hallmark really needs to expand their greeting card selection. Fortunately, jail solved the immediate stalking problem better than I ever could. Life got weirdly peaceful after that, and somewhere in the middle of all the chaos, I met someone else. No fireworks, no constant drama, no exhausting emotional obstacle course. Just a genuinely kind person. He liked going to bed early, getting up early, remembered little things I'd mentioned weeks before, sent cute texts for no reason, spent weekends with me without trying to turn every gathering into an audition for most interesting guy at Applebee's. Turns out healthy relationships are almost suspiciously boring. And honestly, I absolutely love boring. After everything, boring feels like winning the lottery. Looking back now, the party was never really about pizza, beer, or some random 10 o'clock curfew. It was the moment someone tested whether my boundaries actually meant anything. For once, they did. And the second I stopped apologizing for protecting my own peace, my entire life started getting better. Funny how that works.